The unfortunate story of the smartest man in the history. He was reached out to by a reporter from the New York Times to find out what had happened to this child prodigy from back in the day, and it wasn't really on the up and up. She kind of seduced him and got him to talking about things that he wasn't comfortable talking about, and it didn't really paint him in a good light, which eventually drove him insane. William James Sidis was born in Boston on 1st of April 1898, to two prominent doctors, Boris and Sarah Sidis, who were pretty impressive in their own. Boris was a Russian Jew who emigrated to the United States after a wave of anti-Semitism swept through Russia. When he landed in the United States, he didn't even know the language, but he taught himself English, eventually got into medical school and became a prominent psychologist. His wife Sarah was also an immigrant, became a doctor at a time when women were never considered doctors. Both of William's parents believed that anything can be learned and given the proper technique, and so when William was born, he became something of an experiment to them, to see just how smart you could make a human being. They spent their life savings on lessons and books for the young William. Luckily for them, he had inherited their natural brilliance, and by the age of 2 he was reading the New York Times and writing letters in English and in French. By age 6 he was a polyglot with a mastery of English, French, German, Russian, Hebrew, Latin, Turkish, and Armenian. As his impressive abilities increased, his parents turned him into a bit of a media celebrity, a child prodigy that made headlines and newspapers around the world. By the age of 8, he constructed his own language called Vendergood, which he detailed in a book he wrote, called The Book of Vendergood, which also detailed the origins of Roman numerals in the base 12 number system. He now wanted to get into Harvard, but they thought that he was too young and made him wait until he was 11 to enroll. But he proved to be actually smarter than most of the professors and gave lectures on fourth-dimensional bodies, which drew hundreds of people. He becomes something of a cultural phenomenon at this point, hounded by the news media and the public alike. It was said that he had an IQ between 250 to 300, higher than Einstein. William graduated cum laude from Harvard at age 16 and actually did a little bit of teaching and mathematics for a while, and then he kind of dropped out of sight. It seemed all the attention he was receiving throughout his life had begun to take its toll on him, and he told a reporter, "I want to live the perfect life. The only way to live the perfect life is to live it in seclusion. I have always hated crowds." So perhaps the greatest mind of all time went into total seclusion until 1919, when he was arrested for holding a political demonstration. He blamed society's problems on religion and capitalism, which clearly won over the judge because they gave him 18 months in prison after. Leaving jail, William became something of a nomad, moving from city to city, working menial jobs, always changing his name to remain private. But that didn't stop his intellectual pursuits. He wrote literally dozens of books on subjects ranging from cosmology, American history, anthropology, transportation systems, and weirdly on streetcar tickets, which he collected. He published books under a variety of different pseudonyms, including one called The Animate in the Inanimate in 1925, in which he postulated that there were regions of space where time goes in reverse and would not emit light. But due to all the different names he used, we don't really know exactly how many books he wrote. In 1930, he received a patent for a rotary perpetual calendar that actually took into account leap years, and at age 42 he was reached out to by a reporter from the New York Times to find out what had happened to this child prodigy from back in the day, and it wasn't really on the up and up. She kind of seduced him and got him to talking about things that he wasn't comfortable talking about, and it didn't really paint him in a good light. The story made it sound like he went crazy. William took offense to this and he successfully sued the New York Times for libel. In 1944, he passed away at the age of 46 due to cerebral hemorrhage. He wasn't rich by this point and was working as an office clerk. There was no money in his account, there were no friends around, No one knows what he had been doing in his final years, almost no one understood him. Who knows what success he could have reached if people had been kinder to him. Throughout his life William passed several IQ tests, each time the test results proved that he was a genius. Einstein had an IQ of 160 points, Leonardo da Vinci had 180 points, Isaac Newton had 190. William Sidis had somewhere between 250 and 300 points. He was probably the smartest person in history. The lives of many smart people prove that having a genius IQ is never enough. High intelligence doesn't guarantee success. It's important to have social intelligence. It's knowing how to behave in public, how to speak correctly and how to please people. So much potential, and yet he remains nothing more than just a historical footnote.